The Yes Network president, John Filippelli, is here. Go ahead, Mario. Take it away. Episode 63.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to yet another episode of the Mario and Chaos Show. I'm your co-host, Mario Mancini. I'm a former WWE wrestler and co-host of Paradise Alley Professional Wrestling, along with Paul Roma, Big Steve Tracy, and the man behind the glass tonight and every night, the 2020-something inductee into the New England Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame. When we're done with COVID-19, second-generation grappler, Mr. Paul Perez, my brother for about 32 years.
With his Yankee hat on.
In my phone.
With the Yankee hat on.
With the Yankee hat on, Big Daddy. Seated in my phone is a man that I've known for 36 years. He's done everything from soup to nuts in the wrestling business. My emphasis on nuts. He is none other than the voice of the Mario and Chaos Show. He is the guardian of chaos. A Big Daddy. Big Daddy, what's going on?
Mario, we're episode 63, season 2, fans.
I have no number for
everybody.
63. We can turn it around and say 36 and make it Casey Stengel. We could do that.
David Cohn.
Hey, in honor of our guest.
Well, Big Daddy, for the first Pittsburgh Pirates.
So
yeah,
legendary team.
That's right. Great players.
Willie Pops Stargell, unbelievable. He was my favorite, Pops.
Yeah, great. We are family. You're right. But I remember him telling me that they never. Earl Weaver was the legendary manager, and he said, Kenny said they never wanted to lose, no matter how many games they were ahead of anybody. They never wanted to lose to anybody. They were all very competitive, and they took great pride in winning. They said, but they were going to lose one game. That was one game they really didn't mind losing. Because it was the memory of Munson, and it was quite. It was very an emotional night, and you're right. It was Bobby had the big hits that night, and we have we were talking about before about the Yes Network, and the Yankeeography series is our series of biographies of Yankee players. We call it Yankeeography.
Yes, seen every one of them.
Thank you. John, that's what I wanted to bring up, a flip, if you will, to use a wrestling term, because here in episode 63, season 2 of the Mario and Chaos Show, we have the legendary John Filippelli, the president of the Yes Network. John, there's a lot of things I want to talk about. Mario here is a lifelong fan. Before we get on to the baseball thing, you have shown us your library there and your different memorabilia. It's unbelievable. We couldn't be more thankful. I would like to talk about the one thing that you guys have in common. We're in the same area at the same time. You guys know where I'm leading with this. You worked for the same man, as did Paul Perez, Big Steve, and Paul Roma. Kennedy McMahon, when it was the World Wrestling Federation. I don't want to get off these legendary stories. I want to get back to baseball. I want to run down your resume, Flip. This is what I do as the Guardian of Chaos. I want to talk about your time in the WWF when you worked with Vince and you and Mario to compare notes. That's what I'm so interested in hearing all of this, John. That's what I want to hear. To start here on episode 63.
When I was at NBC Sports for 17 years, and while I was at NBC in the mid 80s, wrestling was starting to go really mainstream, and Vince McMahon was taking it there. And I had the privilege of working with a very good friend of mine now, a good friend of mine then, a good friend of mine now. For 9 years, I produced Bob Costas. So Bob and I did a lot of work together. The baseball games, there was a show called NFL Live, which was an NFL football pregame show, postgame show, halftime show. We did that together. We did Super Bowls together. We did World Series. We did a lot of things together. And we I pitched him one day. I was fascinated with what was going on in the world of wrestling, and that it was starting to go mainstream, and the Rock and Wrestling Connection was starting to take off. And I remember seeing this, and I said to Bob, I said, Bob, this might be something we might want to look into. It might be interesting because it's starting to go very mainstream, and it's a lot of fun, and it's rock, and it's wrestling, and it's entertainment, and it's fun, and it's sort of taking wrestling to another level, and it might be something that we could get involved with. So I pitched then a producer, a gentleman, a really good friend of mine named Terry Ewood, who was running a show called Sports World, and he said he liked the idea of it, and he said we'll do a whole show around it. So Bob and I got to work with Vince, and there were other aspects of wrestling that were part of the show, but Bob and I got to work the rock and wrestling part, and so that's where I got to know Vince McMahon, and and we liked him, we got along with him, it was fun, and a couple of years later, when NBC had lost its baseball contract, I was basically, I don't want to say producer without portfolio, but baseball was really what I did. It was my major. I did a lot of sports. I did football. I did basketball. I did Olympic. I did, you name it, I did it. But because
we're gonna run that down, Flip, and boom.
Yeah,
this is to my point. I want to turn it over to Mario because in 1984, I'm gonna let Mario tell it. He was the youngest grappler at the time in the World Wrestling Federation. 1984 to 92, Mr. Big Time. I say it all the time, the most humble man in the world. Mario, this is the legend, John Filippelli, on that side of the producing and the TV, and the legends of Bob Costas and Dick Ebersol on NBC and what he's going on to do. And then yourself on the locker room side with Chief Jay Strongbow and the legends and Tony Altomore and where you were. I want to turn it over to you in response to that side. And you guys were in the same circles, Mario.
Well, Big Daddy, first off, you need to know, for me personally, my first dream was to play for the Yankees. My second dream was to work for Vince McMahon. So, you know what, I could easily turn this show over and do a whole segment for, starting with Thurman Munson's rookie year in 1970. However,
wherever it goes,
wherever it goes,
I think, John, what you're talking about is you might have been the creator and the idea for Saturday Night Main Event. Is that what you're talking
Hardly.
about?
No, I wasn't. I wasn't. I was not the creator. It had anything to do with it. What we did was get NBC to say it's okay. We're gonna put wrestling on. We're gonna do a wrestling show. So
but the Saturday Night Main Event is the wrestling show.
In other words, that was Dick Ebersol actually, because Dick Ebersol was doing NBC Late Night at the time, and he realized he saw the potential and all that, and so he liked the idea, and he and Vince, he pitched it to Vince, and Vince, Vince being very smart said that's a good idea. Get on NBC's late night, if you will. So. But that was Dick Ebersol really who did that. I mean, my contribution was just seeing a really good idea that if I didn't see it, somebody else would have seen it anyway. And it was a great idea. I thought it was a good idea. I pitched it to Costas. He loved it. So we got it done at NBC. So we actually got it on the air. At least we broke the ground. We were the first to get a network, a major network to get back to wrestling.
Right.
And John, now, if I'm not mistaken, if I know my history and the research that I've done since I met you through Dino Costa, I want to thank Dino for hooking us up, because if it wasn't for the infamous Dino show, we wouldn't be talking. That's when you were producer at NBC, and you were there for how long, John, before you transitioned over to the Yes Network? And then that's why I want to bring Mario in so he could tell the locker room side of his story of the talent as compared to the TV and what he experienced with Vince. Because you were only there for a short time before you moved on to, and you were the producing ending part of it.
Yes, I was, I was at NBC for 17 years, and then, I left there. I went to work for Vince for 2 years, and then I worked on a project called the Baseball Network, and I went to Fox for a few years, and then I started the Yes Network with George Steinbrenner, which was 19 years ago. So that's kind of a synopsis of my career, pretty much. But I did get to meet Vince on the rock and wrestling shows, and it was a lot of fun to do, and it was very exciting. Mr. T. Mr. T, and it was Cyndi Lauper, as you guys know, you'll know all this, right? And it was fun. And
well, Mario lived it,
Roddy Piper,
and that's why.
Yeah, I want to talk to you a little bit about that, because I'm sure our paths crossed. We just don't remember each other, but it was an interesting time. I mean, I liked so many of the guys. I mean, Bobby Heenan was such a good guy. I mean, I found it to be such a Blackjack Lanza was a really good guy. I mean, I knew the Chief, Jay Strongbow. A lot of the wrestlers I liked Terry Hope, if you will. I mean, I liked him. A lot of the guys were great. They were a lot of fun. I liked legendary Howard Finkel. Howard was a really good guy to work with. Was fun.
It was the induction speech into the New England Hall of Fame.
Well, yeah, Howard was like a brother to me. There was a lot of love there.
It was fun. It was great. It was good for 2 years. I mean, honestly, to tell you the truth, it wasn't. I was really a baseball person, and a few other things I missed. I missed that side of life. I missed that part of the world. And 2 years. I had a 2-year deal. When 2 years was up, I said I think it was time to move on to do something else. But I learned a lot of things from Vince. I learned a lot of things from Vince, but it's a tough business. And if you're not in it, like I was I was an outsider, and a lot of times if you're not born and bred in the business, grow up in the business, it's kind of tough because outsiders are not treated. They're treated with suspicion a little bit, and it was always tough to sort of get around it.
Well, John, that's because back then something called kayfabe was alive and well, and I'll give you an example. My first I graduated high school June 20th of '84. The next day I turned 18. On June 21st, and on July 31st, I made my debut in the Poughkeepsie Mid-Hudson Civic Center against Craig Valentine. And then on August 9th, 1984, I went to the West Warwick, Rhode Island Music Theater, and I worked with Dr. D. David Schultz, and he broke my nose in 2 places. So now, John, my second professional match, it's an amphitheater, so partially outside, I'm walking back to the dressing room and I'm in a stupor. My nose is broken in 2 places. I'm on Queer Street, right? So as I'm walking back to the dressing room, I'm looking at people I don't even know. Police officers, could have been fans, and I'm going, was the match okay? Did I screw up the match? Was the match okay? Did I screw up the match? I felt someone tug the back of my hair and drag me into the dressing room. And he said, shut up, keep your mouth shut. And that was Chief Jay Strongbow, who ended up being my second father for 28 years. When we hung up the phone, he'd say, I love you. And I'd say, I love you too, Chief. It was we became very, very close. So for you to be on the outside, there was no way on God's green earth you were, but let's face it, you're an intelligent guy. You're a very smart individual. You wouldn't have been able to do what you've done with your life if you weren't. So you knew the deal, even though kayfabe was alive, but we still wanted to protect it. So when you say on the outside in, you're right. Howard Finkel's a world-class guy. In fact, when they were sitting around the table, they didn't know what to name this thing. And Howard Finkel is the one, and sadly, I cried like a baby, he passed away last month or 6 weeks ago.
Right.
He was sitting around the table, and he's the one that said, Beatlemania, WrestleMania. And it stuck. And he's the one that coined the phrase WrestleMania. So he was a world-class guy. Vince was a different individual back then. He was very young. He was in his mid-30s, and he was hungry and innovative. And Hogan was okay. I say Hogan's okay because I'm still pissed off at the
Well, he kayfabed you, Mancini, at a convention.
He did. I'm pissed at him. I'm
pissed
seriously
at Hogan.
pissed at him. Strongbow, a great guy. Blackjack Lanza and Mulligan were good people.
Is he still alive? Is Blackjack still alive?
I think Blackjack Lanza is still alive. I think he is. I'm not sure.
I know this. How do we know this?
I think both of them are still alive because I listen to of course my man Jim Cornette every morning, and he talks about him every now and then.
Sure.
But there were very few idiots in the wrestling business. Very, very few. Thank God.
Quick question for you. What do you remember? while John was in there on the producer side with Costas and Ebersol and doing what he was doing for NBC and being what he deems as an outsider, what were you doing in the WWF during the rock and wrestling era? What do you remember through Tony Altomore and Chief Jay? And you were at the Garden, you know, at 17, 18 years old for some incredible moments.
Well, Tony Altomar broke me into the business, and he was tag team partners with Lil Albano back in the 60s. They were the Sicilians. And 7 months before I broke in, he talked like Mickey, but didn't look a thing like him, you know. But he'd go, right, Perez? He talked like Mickey. He didn't look a thing like him. He'd go, yeah, you want to, it was January 8, it was January.
That's a great impression.
Goes, right. It was January 84, and he goes, you want to go to the Garden with me tonight? I go, yeah, okay. So I went to the Garden that night, and that's the night that Hogan took the strap from the Sheik. And there I am with my arm around the Sheik, grabbing him from Hogan, bringing him back to the, you know, that was 6 months before my 18th birthday. Then
he's a lifer, Flip.
Then when the inception of this thing, what John is talking about, is I was there for the war to settle the score the month before WrestleMania. So I was in the Garden for that too. So, you know, what John was exposed to was you know, if he was around WrestleMania 1 and 2, you know, it was Liberace, it was Muhammad Ali, you know, Danny DeVito was there, Tina Turner was there, Billy Martin was there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, you know, it was an exciting time that will never be relived. They can break their ass in the wrestling business all they want. They'll never duplicate that. They'll never replicate it. It was only once in a lifetime. It was an explosion. You had people who were not, which is very hard to do, because Perez, we used to wrestle. So John, this is some of the way these matches were set up. So you'd get a promoter in a town that wanted to book talent. So he would run a wrestling show, and he would go around the whole town, and he'd get sponsors. So now he had all the money for the wrestling show, but he gave out all the tickets when they took the sponsorship. So now you're wrestling in front of non-wrestling fans. And we're doing our thing in there, and we have each other in a headlock going, brother, you can hear a pin drop. You know, so it was kind of hard to work in front of those people that were sponsors, but were not wrestling fans. Here for WrestleMania, it exploded, and people that weren't even wrestling fans, they were just around it for the glamour of it, because it hit its peak and everybody wanted to be around it. So even if they weren't wrestling fans, they were there, and they were responding.
It was an event. It was an event, is what you're saying.
Oh, right.
Really, that's really what happened. And not only did it become an event, but for, like I said, for NBC to later on make a primetime series out of it under the auspices of Dick Ebersol was a big thing. That was a big step for the wrestling industry. It really was.
Right.
A big step for NBC, because the ratings were spectacular. It showed you that, if marketed correctly, it could be a mainstream product, and it's been successful ever since. It had its moments, it has its peaks and its valleys, and it goes back and forth, and it does really ebb and flow, the business now, very much so. Like I remember when the last event I worked was, I went to Wembley, and they had the 90,000 people there in like 1992, in the summer of '92, and it was that was really when I had my falling out with Vince. I corrected him on a few things, and he didn't like being corrected, and so that was my contract was nearing to an end. And I said, maybe it'd be best for all of us if I just sort of moved on, and that was that. But it was
that worked out pretty damn well for you.
John, don't feel bad. There was a night in Poughkeepsie that he came down between TV tapings, and he took the monitor in the dressing room, and he just smashed it into the ground. And then he was swearing all over the place. And then he spent over $1 million for his own TV production in-house, because the people that he hired to produce the TV were screwing up. So Vince is listen, I've said it on not only this podcast, but every podcast and interview I've ever done. I have no ill feelings toward Vince McMahon. He never did anything to me. You know, I wasn't.
I told John that.
Yeah.
I wasn't a big enough name for him to do anything to me because I didn't sell any tickets. I basically went in there and got my ass beat and got paid. So I didn't sell any tickets. But then again, a guy in my position is very easily, you could look at and say, look, we don't need you anymore. And he never did that for 8 years. He never did. I walked away on my own. He never looked at me and said, or Chief or anybody said, look, we don't need you anymore. That never happened. So I'm grateful to him. That being said, he's a bit of a weird cat, Vince. He's crazy. You know, listen, crazy. If you came into his company as the Rock of Gibraltar and you sold out Madison Square Garden main event as the Rock of Gibraltar, he still wouldn't like it. You know why? Because it wasn't his idea. If it wasn't Vince's idea, he really didn't push it. And, you know, at that time, you know, he thought he was invincible, no pun intended. He thought he was invincible because he was making, listen, he laid all the money that, if WrestleMania didn't do well, there'd be no WWE today. He spent all of his money. And he got lucky because it was a great return. But if it's not his idea,
well,
he's not too hot on it.
You know, some of those ideas, though, I mean, if you start looking at it, I mean, I give him a lot of credit for, you know, putting his own money where his mouth was, because, again, he put the whole company up for WrestleMania. When he started WBF, the World Bodybuilding, I mean, he put a lot of money in that, lost a lot of money. He's lost a fortune on the XFL.
Yeah.
And you could say, well, why didn't you just stay in what you know best, as opposed to, you know, branching out? Well, you know, that's not him, though. He likes to take risks. He's not afraid to take risks. I give him a lot of credit. I mean, he's the greatest marketer that I've ever known. And I've been around a lot of people who know how to sell things. That's the nature of the TV business. You have to know how to sell things. And nobody could sell more stuff than Vince. So I give him a lot of credit for his ability to market people, to market a product. And I mean, there's a lot of things that Vince McMahon brings to the table that are really very, very good. A lot of great business qualities. You know, like I said, at the end of my time there, it was like 2 years. It really wasn't what I figured it might be fun for 2 years. 2 years were up. It was time to go back to what I knew best. And so there was no harm, no foul. So I moved on to go back to do this. And I'm really glad I actually did, because I would not have actually started Yes with George Steinbrenner, a few other things that I've done along the way had I stayed there. So I'm happy that it worked out for me and it worked out for Vince. So, you know, no hard feelings, and that's the way life should be. You know, you try some things, and sometimes things work for the better. Sometimes they don't work at the way you'd see them or the way you would like, but you move on. That's it, you know.
Trust me, you did yourself a favor. Believe me.
Mr. Perez, a second-generation grappler. Thank God you're not wearing that lucha mask tonight, Mr. Perez. How far in are we on episode 63 of Mario and Chaos?
It doesn't matter. We're just going to keep going.
It doesn't matter, fans. We're here on episode 63, season 2 of the Mario and Chaos show. We have a special guest. That's Yes Network president. That would be John Filippelli. We're going to talk about everything from wrestling to baseball. We'll stay here for as long as before John throws us off the air. We're honored and privileged. There's a few things I want to run down, John, because you hit different demographics and you're a special guest on our show. Former WWE executive, we know that. Yes Network president, we've talked about that. Over 45 years as a TV producer in that business.
Yes.
We're going to talk about the 1988 World Series, the Dodgers and the A's. Right. I'd like to talk about Yankeeography. I know Mario's into that. Center Stage, Yes on Deck. Those are all things that you created. Over 100 national Emmys. I don't want to blow smoke up your ass, fans. Mario and Chaos show. Kelly, can you speak to some of those things here? And I want to transition over to Mario's wheelhouse besides the WWE, the Yankees, and why we have you here, Flip, and I appreciate it.
Wow, that's a lot. There's 45 years.
Yankeeography would be great.
When we started the network, George Steinbrenner called me one day and he said to me, he and Randy Levine. Randy Levine is the president of the Yankees, and still is. Called me one day and they said to me, "We're going to start a television network, and we need you to start it." And I had known George, the Steinbrenners, and I knew Randy, and I knew a lot of the Yankee people from my time at NBC, where I was producing World Series. I produced the 7 World Series in my career, and a couple at NBC. So I had met George there, and I produced the Game of the Week, the old NBC Game of the Week, and so that's where I got to know the Yankee people well. So they asked me if I would start the television network, and I wasn't sure in the beginning. I really wanted to do it. I just wasn't sure because, Mr. Steinbrenner could be Mr. Steinbrenner. You think Vince McMahon is a handful? I introduced you to George Steinbrenner. I mean, there was a reason that the Steinbrenners and the McMahons were friends. There's no doubt. And I actually grew to love George, and George was my favorite people in my life. But I will tell you that could be a handful. He really could be. And so I said to him, you're going to start television. Why are you doing that? And he says to me, do you think it's a bad idea? And I thought about it for a second. I said, actually, no, I think it's actually probably a pretty good idea. And he says, why is it a good idea? I said, it's a good idea because you could control your own product. If you could control your own product, why wouldn't you want to do it? I said, if you could control it, you could cut out the middleman. You don't need you could distribute it yourself. You could program it yourself. You could get the content yourself. You could have it be what you want it to be. You could have it be exactly what you want it to be. And therefore, you could save the middleman. You could call me up and scream at me as opposed to calling everybody else and scream at them. So we got a good laugh out of that. And he said to me, well, why won't you want to do it? And I said, I didn't say I didn't want to do it. I just said, I've got to really think about this. So I thought about it, went home, talked to my wife a little bit about it. We talked about it. And then I said, at the end of the day, I said, it'd be a great challenge to start this thing from scratch. It's a piece of history. So maybe it'd be fun to do. I always was a lifelong Yankee fan. My dad owned a bar across the street from Evans Field, kind of strangely enough.
Wow.
And the Dodgers used to come in, and my dad, like Jackie Robinson and Carl Furillo and, Gil Hodges and Joe Black and Roy Campanella. And Gil Hodges, Charlie Neal, all those guys would come in my dad's bar. And so I got to know them when I was like 3 and 4 years old. I was just a little kid. So I loved baseball from that time. I played in high school. It was something that I just dreamed about pursuing. I wasn't good enough to be as a player. I wasn't good enough to make it as a career. But so I did the next best thing. I went into television and became a sports producer eventually. I mean, I took the tour of NBC one day. They got guided tours. They still do. And I left the tour one day. I said, what a great place to work. And I just left in the middle of the tour. And, I went from office to office. They kept throwing me out. I mean, now they shoot you. You can't do any of this anymore. But back then you could. And so I wound up getting hired as a copy boy going, for errands and donuts and coffee or whatever, a couple of days a week. And from there, 7 years later, I was producing the World Series. So, I got very lucky. I got extremely lucky, but, I worked really hard, and it was something I always wanted to do, was to do baseball and sports. So, I was able to combine the two. And so I started working the Game of the Week. I met George. George led me to the baseball network. So everything in life is connected. It's all interconnected, I believe. And I did take the job. But one of the things I said to him was, it was really important to me to be able to, to do certain things. And he said, I will let you be. I will let you do the things you need to do to get this network on the air. Now, I didn't really actually believe all that because I knew Mr. Steinbrenner, and I keep I'm going back and forth from George to Mr. Steinbrenner, depending on what part of my sentence I'm trying to finish. But I said, okay. And he gave me a chance to paint a canvas. And, he says, look, but he couldn't really stay out of the way. But it was actually good. He was a very good sounding board. I'll tell you one really good story about when we were programming the network. And so I went in one day, and I was also, besides, producing and being the executive and everything else I was at the network, I was in charge of programming. So, which I didn't know I was until about a week into the job. They told me you were in charge of programming. And I said, I don't even know how to program a VCR. And he says to me, well, you'll figure it out. You're a smart guy. You'll figure it out. And that's what they told me. So I said, all right. So I started writing ideas down. Like I wanted to do a long form interview show. And I wrote down like Inside the Actor Studio. And I said, I'll call that Center Stage. And I said, I want to do a traveling road show. I'll call that What's It Worth? I want to do a biography series. I'll call it like Yankeeography. So I started writing all these things down on a napkin. So when I went to see him, we had a formal meeting. So I sat down. He says, "So what do you got?" So I'm taking through all these ideas. I said, "I got the show Yankee. I like that. I like that. I like this. I like that. These are good ideas. I like this. I like this." So I said, okay, we're making progress here. Then at the end of the napkin, because I was to write everything on napkins, he says to me, what is that? What does NE mean? I wrote NE at the bottom of the napkin. And he says to me, what does that mean? And I went, NE, not enough. What do you mean we don't have enough programming? So he says to me, get those two guys. Get those two guys. I said, get those two guys. What the hell is he talking to, guys? I said, what two guys? He goes, you know, those two guys in the afternoon. I said, Mike and the Mad Dog? He goes, go get them. Okay, well then that was the first not the first simulcast in the country. It was the second simulcast in the country, and the first sports simulcast was Mike and the Mad Dog, because on the Yes Network. So
wow, that's right, that's correct.
So
John.
that was out of that came that, and even I could go on forever with George Steinbrenner stories, but again, the bottom line here is that he showed enough faith in us and enough faith in me to allow me to do the things that I thought I needed to do, because I was the seasoned television veteran. I mean, Mr. Steinbrenner had a lot of experience, but he wasn't really a television guy. But you know what he was? He was a guy who made things happen. And as I got to know him through the years and got closer and closer to him over time, I realized I actually grew to love him a great deal. And he was extremely kind to me and my family. And I almost lost my son in the mid '80s to cancer. And I'm sorry, not in the mid '80s, in the mid 2000s to cancer. And I will tell you, there wasn't a kinder, more understanding soul of my situation, our family situation, than Mr. Steinbrenner. So I will always be forever in his debt and the Steinbrenner debt for what they did for me and my family at a time when it was a very difficult time in our lives. So I'll never forget that. I always remember him for that. But he was a good guy. You just had to get to know him, and if you when he would get upset about things, if you stood your ground with him, he was one of those people where he never went back at it again. So once we had it out a couple of times, we never had it out anymore. And he let me do my job, and I appreciated his perspective, and I grew to again give him a lot of credit for the success of the Yes Network.
Wow, interesting. Now, fans, we're here on the Mario and Chaos show. I have my producer, well, actually our producer, Mr. Paul Perez, WWE legend and owner of Paradise Alley Pro Wrestling, 2014 New England Hall of Famer, and my brother, Mario Mancini, and obviously TV producer, legend from the Yes Network, John Filippelli. Fans, I want to give a couple of shout-outs. Perez, don't shake your hand. Don't cut me off. Don't say anything in the earpiece. SweetHeal.com. Promo code CHAOS for 20% off on all goods over $50. The fans, help us out here. Help Chaos out. Sweet Heal, my age and just recovering from back surgery. I don't know where I'd be without it. And flip SweetHeal.com. Chaos code. 20% off. But anyway,
so I should go on now. 20%. What should I get for 20% off? I got right.
25%. Listen, there's everything from balms to tinctures to lotions, all legal, Connecticut grown, Connecticut home, local businesses, unbelievable.
Are these like sexual things, like sexual prowess? It's like,
John, I'm glad we went down that road. We could bring back a little levity, but I just want to throw that out there. And I want to thank Paradise Alley, Mario, Big Steve Bail Bonds. Those are our sponsors. And to have John Filippelli here, I'm going to hand it over to Mario because I know he has a few questions for Mr. Filippelli.
Well, that was I can sit there and listen to that all night. That was an incredible lineage.
Me too. I didn't want to stop.
The story is incredible. And you know what? It will bring a smile to my face when I'm watching Michael Kay or John Sterling on those shows going, you know what, John, he's the one that thought these things up. You know what I mean? I think that's pretty cool because I love both of those shows. I like Michael Kay a lot. I mean, I like his attitude. I like the way he approaches the game of baseball, is his philosophies and thoughts and everything. But that's an incredible story. I mean, George, I remember, I don't know if Perez, I think this was 87. I was in, it was 87, January of 87. We were in Tampa, St. Pete, and for TV. And Steinbrenner was in the front row. And Vince McMahon came in the dressing room, and he said, listen, I need everybody's attention. Whoever goes through the middle or the top, make sure you don't go over the middle or the top on the side. Steinbrenner sitting. You got the other three sides. Do not throw each other out anywhere near Steinbrenner. So, I think Vince McMahon tried to emulate guys like George Steinbrenner and Donald Trump. You know what I mean? Especially Donald Trump. I think he tried to emulate him. I know the inside of Vince McMahon. I won't get into that right now.
They're all interconnected.
I know.
Flip knows that too.
I know.
They are
The
connected. Trump, George, Vince. I mean, they're all Linda. I mean, everybody's sort of connected to everybody else here. It's all connective tissue for sure.
My poor daughter, she went to Guilford High School, and Linda McMahon went there, and she went running up to her, and she said, Mrs. McMahon, you know my father. She goes, who's your father? She said, Mario Mancini. She goes, yeah, I'd seen his check come across the payroll a few times. Yeah. That's how she knew me, you know what I mean? It's amazing.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Big Daddy.
Yeah, go ahead. You know we hired Kay? You know how we hired Kay? You want to hear that?
Listen. We could sit here all night, but I would be remiss after this story if I didn't ask you what you thought about the current state moving forward during this pandemic. So don't go anywhere. And if you see me grimacing, listen, I'm only a month out of back surgery. Somebody cut me some slack. Go ahead.
Don't cry.
It's good. What happened was we were looking at, we were trying to figure out who's going to do play-by-play on the network, and everybody had sort of some suggestions. Mr. Steinbrenner had some suggestions, and some other people had some suggestions, and I had some people I thought we should take a look at. And so we go back and forth, and we never could absolutely agree on where we were going to go here. And so I brought up Kay, and they said to me they didn't want to break up the radio team, which was, Kay and Sterling, which was one of the most successful radio teams, in baseball radio, business, in the history of the business. And they were very reluctant to want to break that up. And I said, well, wait a minute, think of if you talk about the value of a television network compared to the value of radio, radio is significant, obviously it means a lot, but the television network obviously is worth a lot more. So I said, this is your investment to begin. I mean, if we're going to try anything and we really can't fetch it, why don't we just go with Kay? And so they went back and forth. And then George said, I don't know. All right. If this doesn't work, it's your ass. I said, what he told me about every 10 days was, it doesn't work in your. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I heard that. How many times he said that to me. So I said, all right, we'll put it on me, sure. And did I think it was going to work? I had a hunch it could work, but I knew there was a lot of work because you have to transition people. Radio and television are two different mediums. With television, you have pictures to support you. It's a different medium than just doing radio. Where radio, you really have to constantly keep talking because if you stop talking, you have dead air. And that's
well, I'm good. That leads me to my point, Flip, of your mantra. And I want to throw this out there because we could bounce all over the place. This is what we do here on Mario and Chaos. But what you just said,
I've heard your shows. I know. You do a lot of bouncing.
Well, we go off the rails, but I do a lot of the listening commentary and stuff for Paradise Alley. But this is what I try to relate to our different industries, although we have this in common, and I hope to move forward. The way we cover a game is as important as the game itself. The imagery and commentary we provide becoming lasting memories for our viewers. Does that ring a bell?
Somebody really smart said that. It was me. That was me, yes.
And I couldn't agree more. And when I read your mantra, John, I was impressed because that's so key to what I try to relate to the younger guys and stuff like that. Mario knows that. Paul obviously does too, from being where they have been, especially Mario being in the business, and our head trainer, Paul Roma. I would be remiss. Mario had texted me. He said he wanted to ask you if you had a John Sterling story, but we're going to wait on that.
John, I always felt in the car.
Oh, go ahead, Mario. Cut me off.
I have to say this. I always felt in the car. I always felt there was a little rub there with Sterling and Kay. I always felt that there might be a little heat there sometimes. You know what I mean? I sensed it listening to them that there might have been a little heat there, but yeah. John, we have the answer right with us. I always felt when the Yes Network was very excited to have the Yes Network. when Kay made that transition, it seemed like he was overjoyed with it. I mean, am I wrong?
I think, well, he had done the radio for 10 years, and I think he looked at it as a really great opportunity, which it actually was. It was a great opportunity for him. And I think he realized that, and I think, he's an enthusiastic individual, and he showed his excitement. I think that has much to do with it, and not so much. I mean, he has great respect for Sterling, for John Sterling. He did, and he still does. And I mean, there was about 2 years ago, it was, we had, Kay did it for an inning. He went and he became John Sterling, and there was a home run that Stanton hit, and he did Stanton hit the home run, and he did a call in John Sterling style because it was John's birthday. So
it is high, it is far.
Yeah, it is high, it is far, it is. Giancarlo, non Paulo, whatever the hell it is.
Yeah.
I don't even know half of what he says. But whatever it was he was saying, I mean, and it was just so great. But again, and we played it for Sterling, and he just loved every second of it,
That's great.
There is a right, listen, especially as time goes by, again, I don't really think there was any real heat ever between them. But, listen, like anything else, I mean, sometimes broadcast partners, I worked with Vince Scully and Joe Garagiola, and they didn't always see eye to eye. I won't go into all the stories about all the pairings on the air.
Listen, no one's listening anyway. Listen, they're going to listen now, but
well, but there are times when it isn't as people would think that. I mean, I give people a lot of credit because we all go to work sometimes, and sometimes we have to go to work, and you don't absolutely love everybody you have to work with. You don't. But you guys got in a ring with people you didn't absolutely love. I don't want to give any secrets here, but it's an industry. And sometimes some people you like working with better than others, right? That's just the way life is. And
well, John, I've been under guys for a 3 count and saying to myself, this guy couldn't out wrestle me. He couldn't wrestle his way out of a wet paper bag. I hate this son of a bitch, but yet I was on the bottom.
But you had to put them over. Right? You put them over, right? And sometimes we have to put people over in our business too. Sometimes we have to do that too, right?
Yeah.
All I know is I had the greatest job. I still have the greatest job. But my whole career, I've been just lucky to be in the right place at the right time and work with great people. And I mean, to tell you, when I started on the Game of the Week, and Sandy Koufax showed me how to throw a curveball. Okay, and I knew Ted Williams. I didn't know him well, but I knew him well enough to have a conversation with him, and he showed me like how to correct my stance.
How incredible is that? How incredible is that?
Hitting tips from Ted Williams and pitching tip from Sandy Koufax. I mean, does it get any better than that? If you're a baseball fan, it doesn't get any better than that. So I mean, that was the fun of all this. And I'm a kid from Brooklyn. I got a chance to sort of live my dream. I couldn't play professionally. I wasn't good enough, and so I did the next best thing. And I've been around. Not only just foot, I mean, I've done Super Bowls, I've done, Olympics, I've done, Final Fours, I've done about every big event.
Well, John, let me run it down. Mario, hold on. Listen, and I'm not blowing smoke, but you don't have a chance.
I don't take it.
John, give me one.
No, John, you got to listen to Big Daddy because he does his homework. Go ahead, Big Daddy.
I do my homework.
God bless you, Big Daddy. Go ahead.
That's enough. My quote was good.
Listen, because I know. Listen, John. We know the mantra. We know who you are now. We know what you've accomplished. But I want to broach this into our audience. So I don't want to embarrass you here, but I want to throw out a couple of things. And I'm just going to ramble on. So let me go, please.
What have we done for the last 45 minutes?
Well, that's okay.
Why stop now, right?
John, I got this son of a bitch every week, brother. Every week I got to interview this guy.
Every week like this? I got organized. We have meetings. We have rundowns. We do.
No, we just come on and do it.
He gave us a whole tour.
I was waiting for you guys. I'm giving a short tour of my office. The most boring thing I could think of. I mean, there I am.
Boring? Are you kidding me? Boring? You showed us the batteries of the 3 perfect games of the New York Yankees fans. John, indulge me. Your baby is the Yes Network. We know that. Obviously, Yankeeography, Yankees on Yes on Deck, center stage. We said that. We went through your whole history. Besides your baby of the Yes Network, and I want to get to this, and then we'll let you go moving forward, and we'll get out of here. You've done the Olympic Games. We talked about the World Series. You've done Wimbledon. We talked about Super Bowls, the NHL, Monday Night Football, the NBA, the PGA, the Bowl Championship Series games in college, the wide world of sports. I want to know, out of all the stuff, you've had over 100 national Emmys. Listen, your podcast right now, the curtain call out there, fans, go out and subscribe to it. Go back and listen to Sean Mooney with Flip on there. What is your, I'll get to my point and we'll tie this up before we move on quickly. Baby, after the Yes Network, that's my question. Your biggest accomplishment.
World Series. I mean, World Series because I love baseball as much as I do, and the World Series because, you know, and especially some, you know, when I was doing them back in the day, I mean, they were, you know, that baseball was still, in the spotlight. I mean, it still is, but I mean, baseball then, I mean, the ratings were, because there wasn't proliferation of all the, you know, the cable networks and, you know, and all the streaming networks that there are now. So there really was only 3 networks. And I mean, and a lot of it was a byproduct of just the 3 networks, but you would get like a 30 rating, a 30 rating, and which was incredible, and a 40 share, 45 share. So working on those events, they really were big events, and they were so much fun to work on. And because I love baseball the way I did, and I got a chance to, you know, World Series, when you do in the baseball business, I mean, it's the epitome of, it's you know, it's the high point of the sport, and to get a chance to work on that was great, and was a lot of fun. So I really very much enjoyed it. In 1996, when the Yankees, you know, hadn't won since they won 77, they won 77, 78. So they hadn't won since 78. They won in 96, and that was Fox's first World Series, and I got a chance to be the coordinating producer and also the producer in the chair, and that was great. And we won an Emmy for that, and it was just a lot, all around. It was just very rewarding, and it was a lot of fun. And again, because it was the Yankees, it meant a lot to me, and it just did.
I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, John, and I don't want to put you on the spot here because it's the current state of affairs of what you think, whether it be the CBA, the owners, what's going to happen moving forward. Do you think we're going to have a season? What do you think is going to happen through this pandemic? And what are you guys preparing for, if you could let something out here on the Mario and Chaos show?
Well, I would say this, you know, if you know, baseball, look, people need the distraction. They need the connection. They need the release. Now maybe more than they have in a really long time because of what we're faced with. And if baseball can get back on the field, it has to do 2 things to get back on the field. We have to be able to sort of, navigate the virus as best we can. And also there has to be sort of a labor understanding. And I believe they're working hard on a labor understanding. So because they need to, and they should. And because there is really, if they can play, they should play. The other part of it is, you know, we just don't know, is the virus. You know, it's they'll take every precaution. Obviously, every precaution will be taken because nobody wants to get anybody sick. But, you know, and I think we'll try it. I mean, if we have a labor understanding, which I believe we'll reach, then I think it's a matter of just, you know, trying to stay out there, and hopefully, you know, there'll be testing every day, and there'll be a way to sort of play games and not get, you know, people sick. But if people do get sick, then I do think that there'll be a responsibility, and they'll probably wind up shutting it down, I would think. But who knows? We don't know. We just have to. Nothing about this virus has been predictable. Nothing so far. And there are people saying, you know, look, the NBA is making plans, the NHL is making plans to come back, baseball is making its plans to come back, football is making its plans to either start on time or maybe not start on time, have to delay the season. How long do you delay? Nobody has any answers here. So I would be foolish to sit here. I'm not really being evasive. I would just be foolish to say I really have all the answers when I really don't have any of them. I'm hoping that, again, we'll figure out the labor part of this, and I believe we will. And then it's a matter of trying to get back on the field and take enough safety protocols and hope that we can get a bit of a season, because you have to play about 80. They're going to try to play 80 games, which would be about enough to give it, you have the integrity of some kind of race, because I think if you anything less than that, I just don't think it's doable. And I think, I think everybody understands that you have to play some games to have the integrity of some kind of race, right? You just can't say first team wins 10, here in the postseason. You can't.
Well, this goes back to the 93 and 94 seasons, John. Nothing like a pandemic, but we know what happened there. And then you go on to the juiced ball era of McGuire and Sosa, allegedly, in 98. So I mean, those are valid points. I wasn't trying to put you on the spot. I have you
No,
here.
we have a
There's
lot
some
to
questions.
overcome, though. There's a lot that has to happen here, but I'm optimistic. I really am optimistic because I think that everybody understands that there's a lot to lose, and so everybody's gonna make best efforts to try and figure this out. And
I sure hope so because I'm like that fan. Baseball isn't just a sport for me; it's like a romance. You know what I mean? So, other than that strike back in the early '90s, this has been horrible. But I'd feel bad if I didn't tell my Yankee stories.
Tell me.
Please.
before
Listen,
we
John, the
left.
check is in the mail. I swear to God, John,
What
the
time
check
is
is
it?
in
Yeah.
the
What time is it?
mail, man.
Yeah.
Sponsors,
So-
Sweet Heel, Chaos Code.
11:05.
So
Wait a minute.
yeah, but John,
I've been listening to
imagine
you
what
guys
the
for an
show
hour
would be
and
if
10
they
minutes.
sat down and it was scripted and we had meetings and we had it all. We just come on here and start talking. So
I could tell. I could tell you. Really, I could tell.
he's gonna get off, Big Daddy. No, that was the worst podcast I ever had in my life.
No, it's
Oh,
not.
John, this is unbelievable.
though,
You see, I got the
listen, when I-
Sopranos.
My last match in pro wrestling was April 26, 1992, in
Can you be more
Huntsville,
exact? Can you be more exact?
in Huntsville, Alabama.
Hey, he's writing a screenplay right now, John. Be
Yeah,
careful.
Huntsville, Alabama, against Rick Rude. Right.
Ravishing Rick Rude?
Right. So I had to do something with my life. I haven't gone to college yet. Obviously, I haven't gone to law school yet if I didn't go to college. So I got a job with a security company. And it was an international security company. And they had Yankee Stadium. And I was the operations manager in New Haven. So when there were big events, they would call down what's called the suits, which were the managers. So in 1992, Yankee Stadium had Pink Floyd, they had U2. I did those concerts. Well, they called me down for Old Timers Day. And I got Joe DiMaggio. He's looked at me.
Well,
Let me tell you something. He's an asshole. He goes, I'm not signing your autograph. I'm not signing anybody's autograph. I said, Mr. DiMaggio, it's against company policy. It's against company policy to get an autograph from me. Just like when I was a bodyguard for Seinfeld, he folded up that bill and he said, this is for you. And I said, I cannot accept your gratuity, but thank you. Right? So now everybody's laughing at me because I got DiMaggio.
How much was the gratuity?
What's that?
How much was the gratuity?
Well, John, I tried to do it for the rest of my life. I haven't been able to do it. He rolled that bill up to a toothpick. I tried to do it. I can't do it. I swear to God, it was as big as a toothpick. I don't know how he did it. So I don't know what it was. But everybody was laughing at me. I wanted Rizzuto, right? I wanted Rizzuto. Everybody was laughing at me because they knew I was going to get abused by DiMaggio. So DiMaggio, I'm outside the dugout, where the hall before you get into the dugout. I'm standing out there. He's the last one to be announced. Joe DiMaggio comes out like this.
It was in his contract. The latest, the greatest living Yankee. It was in
Right.
his contract. He came out.
He
last.
comes out like this. He comes back in, goes around the corner. There I am. I go, Mr. DiMaggio, Mr. Steinbrenner would like you in his box. He goes, I'm going home. And nobody knew it except the people that worked at Yankee Stadium that the press box had hot dogs for 50 cents. So he went home. I had the rest of the day off. I went up and got about 3 hot dogs and watched the game. I watched the game. The other story I had to say something.
I won't tell anybody about that story.
Oh yeah, I had to say something to him because I just had to. So another time I was down there for a Red Sox game, and I'm walking out. One of the last people was walking out. Who's walking out? Big Daddy.
Yes, sir. I'm listening.
In the wrestling business, we carried some pretty big stuff. Walking in front of me was Paul O'Neill with the biggest bag you ever wanted to see. I mean, this thing was huge. You know, the thing we carried our stuff, our boots and all our stuff, it was pretty big, but this thing was gigantic. And he's just going up the stairs. and he's got his head down, and he's like pissed, and I'm like, nice game. He's like, nah. He didn't even speak. He went, no, nah. Like, like that. You know what I mean? It's really cool. I brought Jerry Seinfeld in to meet Don Mattingly. Mattingly shook his hand so fast and turned his back. And Jerry Seinfeld looked at me. Larry David was with him, and he looked at me and Larry and said, did I do something wrong? I said, come walk outside with me. I said, it's my guess that it's so close to game time that he's nowhere else but in that game. I said, so don't be offended. Don't be offended.
Do you know I'll tell you a good George story has to do with Larry David and Seinfeld. George did not, when they pitched the TV show to him, and he didn't want to do it. Like they wrote a part in as a famous part, George, right?
Hilarious.
And he really didn't want to do it, and so he didn't do it. And so Larry David, played George, and he put a wig on, right?
Yeah.
So every time he would do the, Costanza, go out and give me some calzones. It really wasn't.
Yeah.
Actually, White Castle, right? But you could, because George used to always want White Castles. So it was like, God, somebody go out, give me some White Castles. So he sent people out for White Castles, but because it was a commercial endorsement, right? You couldn't do that. They had to change it, so they changed it to calzones and things. But George came around on it because his grandchildren loved Seinfeld, and they said no, not making fun of you. It's really great. It's great. It's a great show, and they love you, and they're having fun. They're having a good time, and blah 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 blah. And so then George got sort of okay, and he understood it. They said okay, so he really wasn't upset with it, but he wasn't.
Yeah, that was something. Seinfeld was something. The character, and then even to have Keith Hernandez on there as a Mets fan.
Paul O'Neill. Paul was in it too.
And O'Neill, right?
Yeah. And Bernie Williams and those guys.
Quick question, because I know you were on the network together. Let me ask you this, Flip. I don't know how we're coming in on the Zoom and what we're doing here, because we're doing audio and video. This will be on YouTube, but we'll be on all our social media platforms.
Big Daddy, spill it, because you know what? After tonight, it's all downhill. We're never going to do better than this.
No, we reached the bar.
Listen, it's like having
Vincent Kennedy McMahon himself. We're not
listen. It's like having the Rocky Marciano of sports, television on this little podcast. So get it out. Spit it out.
You okay? What happened over there?
Yeah, spit it out. He's making me fall all over the place. Spit it out.
I just go into the character of the Guardian of Chaos. I would be another question that I had to ask you, because I've met him several times. I even played softball.
What is that?
You like these Oakleys, huh? This was a part of my gimmick when I was the manager of the Guardian of Chaos, Big Daddy, and I still have it around all these years later. But I want to ask you about a guy who I've met several times, and I did a lot of remotes with the Yes Network at the Mohegan Sun. Mike Francesa. Give me your best Mike Francesa story. Something positive, something we can laugh at, something that maybe is going to bring a little more je ne sais quoi, if you will, to the Mario and Chaos show. And
Big Daddy,
I want to hear about Francesa.
You're talking about a guy, but you know what? He thinks he's a radio god. He insults a ton of people. He thinks he's bigger than Stern. I'm really not interested.
Good. Next question.
Flip worked with him. Flip.
Good.
This is what I'm
saved by John Filippelli.
Yeah, let's move on.
Saved by the Flip Man.
There you go. Move on to something else. Good.
I think I answered. I think I truly answered this question. Yeah.
What I would like to talk about, John, is your podcast. I know you've been on with Sean Mooney. I know you recently had Steven Sharippa, who follows me on Twitter, of HBO and Blue Bloods fame. I would love to talk about Steven Sharippa and your podcast and your partner, who I don't think Mr. Mancini, the legend, the pro wrestling legend of Paradise Alley, I don't think Mario likes your partner. And I'm going to call it out, create some heat, and bring some levity amongst this pandemic, these hard times. Flip.
Kevin Sullivan? Not the wrestler Kevin Sullivan, but the digital vice president. That person? You don't like Kevin?
Mario, your thoughts on his podcast? Who's your podcast partner? It's the Curtain Call. Am I correct?
Yes, and Kevin Sullivan, who does our digital media, is my partner on it, and we used to do it on Facebook Live, and we morphed over from Facebook Live when we started to do podcasts at Yes, and it's a lot of fun. We really enjoy it. We have a good time, and we've got some pretty good guests. I use my connections to get good guests.
I'm a little confused here.
No.
I'm as confused as a baby at Hooters. Mario said something. Mario, what did you say to me about one of his podcast partners, or was it a broadcast party? He said, I'm not too crazy about that guy. I don't know him. You weren't crazy about who was the guy. I'm not trying to create heat. Who was the guy that you said something about? What am I doing here in episode 63?
I've never met Kevin Sullivan, the wrestler, and I don't know the other Kevin Sullivan.
Well, I have the Kevin Sullivan, the wrestler. I was talking about who was the broadcast guy that you were talking about when we talked about Flip. Well, there was somebody that you did not dislike them, but was about their style or whatever their presentation was, that you was a little off character. Who was it?
I have a shovel over here. You guys can dig yourself out of this.
No, I can't dig myself out of it now. I tried to start something here.
I can't. I mean,
let me quote the great Captain Lou Albano. Obviously, I have the brain of a dehydrated BB. John, I'm going to wrap this up.
Thank God.
I don't know how long we're in since the end there was so awkward because Mancini. I'm going to talk to you.
I got a little bit more time if you want to go a little longer. I can go a little longer with you guys.
Well, I would love to talk. Let's talk about yes. Well, and listen, and the fee is going up. Holy cramoly, Mancini! I'm retired. Mancini's the one that makes all the money. I don't want to say anything. I don't want to say it out loud.
Your producer Paul has got his work cut out for him.
Yeah, Brett
he really does.
Cut out for him. Yeah,
you give him a
Let's talk about Sharippa and your appearance with him in the last podcast that you did, and your podcast, The Curtain Call. I would love to let the fans know where they could hear you besides watching you on the Yes Network. That's what I would love to hear.
Yeah, it's called Curtain Call, and it's we give you good Yankee news, and we talk about usually get guests from the world of broadcasting or the world from entertainment, and we've been able to parlay that. We have a lot of fun on the show. It's a good listen, and if you want some good Yankee news, and if you want some sort of insight onto some world of entertainment or world of sports media, it's a lot of fun. And we started off we started off slowly, and then we fizzled out altogether. But no, we started out slowly, and we've actually built quite a following, and it's a lot of fun, and I really enjoy it. And we've gotten a lot of nice write-ups, and people have been very cordial and very respectful of it. So it's fun, and if you get a chance to listen, you get it wherever podcasts, or you find your local podcast or any podcast. It's called Curtain Call, and it's the one that's got the Yankee top hat on it. It's the Yankees and the Yes Network. So it's a lot. I have listened to a couple of episodes, probably about 5 or 6 your last episodes, and again, the most current one with Steven Sharippa was amazing, and then you went back to the one in November of 2019 when you were on Sean Mooney's podcast. That was an hour-and-a-half show, and that was a must-listen, John. And that was fun. That was really a lot of fun because I hadn't seen Sean. I mean, I knew him back. You guys know him. I mean, I knew him back in the day at the WWF, and I liked him. A good guy, and so he extended it. So I just called him out of the blue. I found him out of the blue. Hadn't spoken to him in a long time. And for whatever reason, I was just thinking about him, and I just gave him a call. And then he said, "I've got a show. Would you like to come on my show?" And I had no idea he had a show. And I said, "Sure." So I went on, and we spent all the time talking about baseball. And then eventually I said, "Do you want to answer any wrestling questions? Because it's your wrestling podcast, So eventually got around to that. But we had a nice conversation. We talked about back in the day and how the business had changed, and both the baseball business and obviously the wrestling business. So many things have changed, and the world has changed since then. So, but we had a good time visiting with each other and sort of catching each other up on life, and it was fun. It was a good listen, and I enjoyed it a lot. And but thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Oh, I really did. Now, currently, John, do you read? Are you someone who's into books? Are you into the writing community? Because I'm also into reading books myself. Is there anything that you suggest? I suggested to you. AEW, Justin Roberts.
Yes.
The best seat in the house. Did you get a chance to read it?
No, I got a chance to listen, though. I listened to it because I didn't have to,
What'd you think?
You have time to read, so I'm in the car. I pop them in the car. It was a good listen. It's as someone who had worked in the business for a couple of years, I found it the most interesting listen. And a lot of the...
Yeah, Justin, I met as a teenager. He went on to work for Vince for years. He's in AEW now with the Khan family, who owns the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's doing amazing things. We're still in touch. And I didn't find out until just recently, as I had told you, that he actually put me over in the book when we worked with The Rock and had an appearance in Valleys. And then when I had a chance to work with guys that Mario and Paul had worked with Terry Funk, and I was calling out the legend. And I'm glad you enjoy it. And Justin is one hell of a person, one hell of a guy. Mario, any questions for the legend who's willing to hang out here? I don't know why, but we love him.
Big Daddy, is that why you sent him the book? Because you were over in the book?
That's exactly why he sent me the book. That's exactly why.
Should I tell him to go out and buy a couple of WWE encyclopedias or no? No.
Listen, I'm going to be honest because I tell it like it is. I did tell Flip that not only am I in it, but it's a great read. But yes, Mario, okay, he's been in 3 WWE encyclopedias. He was the first opponent of The Undertaker. And recently on Busted Open Radio, I don't know if you listened to them, Flip, he was voted the top 10 jobbers of all time in professional wrestling.
You know what? What a landmark in my life to be voted one of the top 10 losers in professional wrestling history. What an honor that was bestowed upon me as being one of the top 10 losers
by Sirius XM.
The pro wrestling business.
When you come in the ring, they ID you with a graphic, right? When I got to the WWF and I watch a match, and I'd say, why don't you put a graphic in on the opponent? And they'd say, well, because they're just there to sort of, get the other guy over. And I said, well, it's not fair to him, but give him some credit. Put his name in there. So I insisted that we put your name in. So I put people's names in. That was one of the first things that we did. It didn't last long. So when I got out of there, they changed it. But
I got out of there, they changed it.
That tells you what an influence I had on the wrestling business. But
Big Daddy, if you want me to say what's on my mind, I'm going to say.
I want you to say what's on your mind. John Filippelli is here.
Baseball. I want to walk into the cathedral. I want to see the green grass.
You've never been to Yankee Stadium?
Oh, of course I have.
So, want to see baseball? I see. I got it now.
I want to walk in there. I want to see the left fielder whip it all the way to the right field. I want to see ground balls.
You were a season ticket holder, right?
Home runs.
You were a season ticket holder, Mancini?
I want my Yankees a season ticket holder. I don't make that much money, Big Daddy.
Or is it your law group? Who's the law group, Mancini? Who's the season ticket holder?
They used to have season tickets behind home plate, but that went by the wayside. So,
John, your thoughts on the old stadium, quickly, since you said it a couple more times, you should have never said that. Your thoughts on quickly comparing the history of the old stadium as compared to the new stadium. Obviously not here to say anything negative. I'm not going to throw softball questions, though. I'm going to hold you to task because I am an investigative journalist. Your thoughts on
I would say, well, first of all, the stadium that there's been a couple of stadiums, and people tend to they overlap, and people get a little confused about them. There was the original Yankee Stadium built in 1923, the house that Ruth built. That was that stadium, right? And in 1976, that stadium, that stadium basically went away, and on the same spot they put up a new one. So that would be stadium number 2, and that stadium was there till 2008, and then that went away in the new stadium that we're currently in, right? So they've had a sort of couple of stadiums and a couple of incarnations, if you will, of Yankee Stadium. But I would say the last one that they were in, the one from 76 to 08, that one,
right? The second one,
yeah,
right? The second one.
I would say that one was. It was. Listen, it was intimate. It was fun. But it really had. It was falling apart. I could tell you stories about it was falling apart, and it was. And it was time to sort of get a new stadium, and they needed it. The Yankees needed a new stadium, as did the Mets, by the way. The Mets got Citi Field, so they needed a new stadium.
I grew up in Shea Stadium, John. I grew up in Shea Stadium.
My condolences. Go ahead, John.
but they needed new stadiums, and. I like the new stadium. It's different, Again, it's unfair to say I like one more. One had certain. I like some things about the old stadium, and I like some things about the new stadium. I like the amenities in the new stadium, and it's the scoreboard is great, and the amenities are great. And the old stadium, there's just sort of an endemic charm to it that I sort of liked. And the Yankees won a number of their championships there, so it was. You're always fond of a place you win championships in. And
what's your favorite? What's your most special championship, John? You mentioned '96 specifically. what's your most special championship to John Filippelli, the most to you personally?
Probably 96 because it was Fox's first World Series. It was Fox's first Emmy. It was Fox coverage Emmy. It was a very special World Series when the Yankees came back from that 2-0 deficit, and they were really getting their ass kicked the first two games. And it was like even the greatest of fans were looking at this Brave team and go like, "Whoa, this is formidable!" And we're down 2-0 in our own ballpark. I mean, it's really
there's
tough when they went fair and they came back.
Famous story.
And
That's the famous story when Steinbrenner peeked into Torrey's office. He goes,
"That's right.
What are we going to do?" And Torrey goes, we're going to go to Atlanta. We're going to win 3 there and then come back and win it.
Yeah. It's true. That's the story. Yeah. I'm not so sure Mr. Steinbrenner believed that, but you know what? It turned out to be true. So it was.
Yeah.
You know, but I remember, David Cohn, that series, I said I was producing those games for Fox. And David Cohn and I were friends, good friends then. We're still good friends now, and we've been through a lot together as friends. But we're pretty close. And so he was telling me, like, I remember him we shared a ride home. Well, one of the games got rained out, and so we took a car back to Greenwich. I live in Greenwich. He was living here at the time. And so we started talking in the car. He was just carrying on. He says, "I can't believe those guys. They're laughing at us. They're laughing at us. I tell you what, I'm going to take the ball, get to Atlanta. I'm going to shove it up their ass. I just am." And he says, "You know what? Nobody laughs at us. We're not going to be laughed at. We're going to win this thing. And I tell you what, it's going to start in Atlanta. It's going to turn around right there. Give me the ball. We're going to turn it right around." And he did. He pitched a great game, and he turned it around. So, you know, David, one of those people. Dave's a fascinating guy, and you know, he's a Yankee icon for a lot of reasons. But
well, I love him, John, because he was a part of the Mets history too. I love David.
Yes, he was. He's part of both histories, and you know, there's a lot of Strawberry was, Gooden was, you know, quite a few players who have been. But you're right, he was, but he's a very special individual and one of the greatest competitors, maybe the fiercest competitor. And I've been around a lot of professional athletes, a lot of them, and I don't know anyone that I met was a fiercer competitor than David Cohn. He just wanted to win.
Question, Flip.
Inspired teams.
Question.
So I would say that series.
I'm going to ask you something out of the box because that's what I do.
Yeah.
I want to hear either or, if I could. If not, you can kayfabe me because I'm used to it by Mario Mancini. Big Steve, Roma, Perez, they're always kayfabing me. I would love to hear maybe a funny or interesting fun fact on either Derek Jeter or Alex Rodriguez for our listening audience. If you could, something you could share.
Interesting fun fact.
John.
Well, okay. I could tell. Well, okay. Well, I'll start with Jeter. The day before he got his 3,000th hit on a Saturday, and that on Friday night, the night before, he had 2,998. And my son and my son became close with Derek because of the battle that my son fought with cancer, and Derek was just great, just terrific to my son during that time. So we went in the clubhouse to say hello. And so we were there and we go over it. Derek really loved, he still does. He loves, like, he's fascinated with the weather. Like he would be, I think if he could be something else, he'd be a weatherman. Just fascinating.
Everything he touches turns to gold anyway.
Incredible. But he was big on the weather. Loved studying the weather. So he'd have that little radar in his locker. And so we went over and he's showing us the radar and he says, "We're not going to play tonight. We're going to rain out." And so I said, and I could tell he was upset. And I said to him, well, he says, well, I'm sure we'll make the game up. And he says to me, "No," he says, I just gotta, I want to get this. I got to get past this. I got to get this out of my system. I got to get these 3,000 hits so we can all move on. He was so not embarrassed, but he was not about attention. He hated attention. Humble,
very humble.
Yeah, very humble, and he didn't like attention. He really didn't, and because to him the attention was the spotlight should always be on the team. It was about the team winning and about and doing right by the team. And so he never wanted to focus on him. He didn't want any attention put on him. So to him, this was another delay, like a delay in this whole process of getting 3,000 hits. He just wanted it done, and he wanted it out of the way. and that meant more to him, I think, than getting the 3,000 hits when he got it. Even then he waited. If you remember that day, he waited to tip his hat when he hit the home run. He hit his home run right off. I think it was David Price hit the home run. As a matter of fact, I think it was, and he waited to the Rays, the Tampa Bay Rays, came out on the top step of the dugout and they clapped. He waited for that before he went and tipped his hat to the crowd because he didn't want to seem like he was showing them up. He didn't want to show the Rays up. So that tells you a lot about the character and, what Derek Jeter, is all about. And Alex, I mean, I know Alex pretty well. I like Alex. I do. Alex is a good guy. I mean, if you get to know him, you realize that he's a good guy. I mean, he made mistakes. He made quite a few mistakes. But
amazing athlete. Like
probably, and I've seen. I mean, I know the game. I played the game. I mean, I didn't play at a high school level, but I've studied the game professionally. I know the game. I really do. And I must tell you, I mean, I don't know that there's only a handful. I mean, he's an elite. He's one of the all-time great players, and they throw that moniker gets thrown around a lot about players. No. He really is one of the all-time great talents. He really is. And he made a lot of sacrifices when he came to the Yankees. And he was a great shortstop. He went over and played third, decided to go play third so Derek could stay at short. Because it would have been easier transition for him than it would have been for Derek to try and play third. I mean, that told you a lot about. I mean, he was about that. He made that sacrifice. He did a lot of things. He's done a lot of good things for people. It kind of goes sometimes under the radar because he's had such a kind of a crazy history and in some cases a checkered history. But I must tell you, if you get to know Alex, you realize that he's done a lot of good qualities in him. He cares about people. He's done a lot of good works for charity that don't go publicized. And and I give them all, Jeter, Alex, George, I give them all a lot of credit because what they shared in common was they didn't want the publicity when it came to doing charitable works. They all did them, right? But to them, it was, George used to say to me all the time, he'd say, like somebody would get, unfortunately, we watch the news and something would happen and a policeman would die in a line of, the line of duty, or a firefighter or a first responder or someone. And he'd say, find out, he'd say to us, or general, say to us, find out who the parents are, who the kids are, and make sure the kids go to school. And he would set up scholarships and stuff for people, and so they could go to school. The kids could go to school. I mean, it was like, and he didn't want the attention because he said, if you do something for somebody and more than you know about it, and more than one person knows about it, then you did it for the wrong reason. That told you a lot about.
Well, you know who Alex Rodriguez, as you hear these amazing stories about Derek Jeter and A-Rod. It reminds me a lot of Mario's good brother and our head trainer, who's someone very similar as far as athletic and volunteering and being humble and someone who never really wanted it and controversial. And that's pretty Paul Roma from the Four Horsemen, Power and Glory, Pretty Wonderful. The list goes on. And I could have Mario quickly address that. Roma sounds a lot like that, Mario.
Well, yeah, I mean, and he sounds like A-Rod, you know what I mean? I love Roma just like I love my own brother. 36 years, I met him in 84.
Drinking, tell me the truth. What are you doing there?
No.
Straight edge, Flip. He's straight edge, man.
To know him is to love him, meaning that if you come around this guy a couple of days, you're going to walk away and go, this guy's an asshole. And if you think he's an asshole, you don't know him. So you got to get to know him in order to really appreciate him and know that he cares and he's a tremendous human being. And yeah, Paul Roma did a lot of charity work, mostly for
St. Jude's.
St. Jude's.
That's the big one. That's Roma's baby.
St. Jude's. Most of his work was for St. Jude's, and he still works with St. Jude's. And Power and Glory. Well, Power and Glory was with him and Hercules Hernandez. That was a very arrogant, a very arrogant tag team. One's got the power and the other one's got the glory. And what people don't know is the power and glory to God. No one knew that, but them. You know what I mean? So, a lot of, what Mr. Steinbrenner did and what A-Rod did, and what I understand is A-Rod is a tremendous student of the game, knows a lot about, managing a game, a tremendous knowledge of the game itself. what these guys did, what it was, you know, with the charities, basically, you know, what Steinbrenner said, he's basically quoting Matthew 6. You know what I mean? And don't let people see what you do, or only keep it between you and God. And that's what they did. And that's what Roman did too. So,
well, that's why, listen, only here can the Guardian of Chaos and the Mario and Chaos show make a comparison between Alex Rodriguez and Paul Roma. It doesn't get any better than that.
I have a great feeling that if A-Rod and Roma would have been very, very close friends. And
do you realize what Alex did? Do you realize what he's had to, what he overcame?
Oh yeah.
There are stories. I mean, about he's potentially could be maybe one of the owners of the Mets. I mean, or if he may get there, he doesn't get there. I mean, I have no idea if he's going to get there or not. But I will tell you this: the fact that he could be that could even be a discussion, given what he had to overcome and and he quite frankly he dug his own hole. With the steroids and the things that had happened in his life, and he readily admits it, and he's been on the straight and narrow since, and he's done a lot of acts of kindness. He's been really terrific with people. He has gone out of his way to set the right example, and I must tell you that for him to be, he's not only one of the faces of the game, he may be the face of baseball now. When you start looking at the players,
amazing lady and Jennifer Lopez. I mean, let's not forget that. An amazing woman, salt of the earth.
She's awesome, by the way. She's awesome. She is really nice. Really nice.
I don't know her, obviously.
I have my own philosophies, and I tried to call in to Francesa about it, because Francesa, when it came out,
that's twice.
When it came out, I called. He actually took my call, and I said, Mike, you know nothing about anabolic steroids. Nothing. Don't talk about them. You don't know what you're talking about. He goes, wait, am I talking to another steroid taker? I said, yes, you are.
Yeah, but didn't they get along? Listen, isn't the Flip? I know we're going overtime here on a Mario and Chaos show.
There is no overtime. I have an 8 o'clock call in the morning. Other than that, I'm good.
Well, Perez has to go to work at 4 o'clock in the morning. Isn't there a great relationship between Francesa and A-Rod? Am I correct about that?
There's a relationship between them. Sure. I don't know if there's still a relationship, but there was. Yeah, sure.
Okay. John, well, I know. Listen, I don't want to put you on the spot here.
No. Listen, I'll say this. I'm always upfront.
What are we talking about?
Honest on every podcast I've ever done, from the steroids in wrestling to the homosexual encounters in order to get over and get a bigger spot in the company with executives. I've talked about it all. And from someone who I like to consider myself at least somewhat of a half-ass athlete in pro wrestling, what I mean?
Don't cut yourself short.
Oh, listen, if you look at my matches in 84 and then you go to 1989 and 90, there definitely is a transformation in size and definition and everything. And you have a lot more energy. But you know what? I will always make the argument for Alex Rodriguez, a man
right, this is where we're going, Flip.
God-given talent to play the game. He didn't need the steroids. And let me tell you something. Bernie Williams got embarrassed because he put DECA in his knee. Why? Because DECA is a healing steroid. It makes you heal faster. Bernie Williams wasn't going to get 24-inch biceps by putting that DECA in his knee. It was going to help his knee. But, Alex Rodriguez had the God-given talent to be a great player in the game without the steroids. You know what I mean? You want to go after.
You know what? But that's not. See, I listen. I understand your point, but I would say this. I mean, there were he was the only one who did steroids. Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens were the only ones allegedly to do steroids. It's what, there were 800. How many players in the game? Like 800, 850, 1,000. How many players in the game? How many were on steroids? It was an era. And I would say, I don't know what the percentage is, but I would say it was a fair amount of players who were on steroids.
Well, Flip, I took them too. I took them too in the 80s when they weren't illegal. But it was an era, so I have to agree with you. I agree with Flip. I agree with Mario. Both you guys make valid points.
Listen, you want to go after McGuire and Sosa. You want to go after McGuire and Sosa. You go ahead and do that. But Well, you know,
Why go after them? Ask you a question. Why go after them? Because I mean, I understand why people might who are purists and everything else say, oh, you should. But you know what? They brought the game back. Okay,
they did.
Game came back from the labor dispute of '94. The game was brought back by home runs. The way Babe Ruth brought it back from the Black Sox scandal in 1919.
Yep.
Right, Babe Ruth brought it back. The home run was the currency of the game. McGuire and Sosa hit home runs and became the currency of the game. It brought it back. So listen,
I agree with that.
There were ebbs and there were flows. There were highs and there were lows. That was a low. It was a low in baseball. I mean, there's no question. But you know what? But and I also will tell you that it fractured a lot of things in the game. Was the steroids? There's no doubt that it had a tough effect on the game. No question. But I will tell you that over time, it's sort of like. I think that Alex Rodriguez gets in the Hall of Fame. I think Barry Bonds gets in the Hall of Fame. I think Roger Clemens gets in the Hall of Fame one day. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but I think as this group of writers sort of grows older and it's getting replaced by younger writers, I think people will tend to look at it in a different light.
What about Pete Rose? What are we going to do with Pete Rose?
Dies. I want Pete in before he passes away.
Pete had
your thoughts.
He had a lot of chances. He didn't have one. He had 50. Of which all he had to do was tell it like it was supposed to. All he had to do was tell the truth about it, and he didn't. And they got tired of it.
Wow.
That's really what happened.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Pete Rose was asked on a number of occasions, did you take, I never took it. I didn't bet on the game. I didn't bet on the game. If he had said, honestly, and I know Pete, and I like Pete a lot of respect for him. But if he had just said, look, yeah, I made a mistake. I bet on the game. It's a forgiving society. You have to.
We're big on second chances. Look what A-Rod's doing.
Let me finish this.
Second chances. Go ahead, Flip. I'm sorry, Flip.
No, I want to finish this one point. Because all you have to do in our society is to say, look, I made a mistake. I screwed up. Who hasn't made a mistake? Everybody's made mistakes. We all screw up. Alex and I used to talk about, everybody falls. How you get up matters too. Okay? And Pete had a chance. He had a number of chances, a number of commissioners to say, I did it. I made a mistake. I screwed up. I really did, and I'm sorry. That's all he had to do, and he would have been in the Hall of Fame a long time ago, but he wouldn't admit it. The fact that he wouldn't admit it, he was always in denial over it, that's what's kept him out. So I don't really see a path back for him now. I think that ship is coming. It's gone. It just sailed. I mean, I could be wrong. He's a great player. He was a great one of the greatest all-around players in the history. Who could have played all the positions that the all-star that he was? Pete Rose is a tremendous baseball player.
Tremendous.
All they had to do was say, because you can't bet on baseball. That's a taboo going back to the Black Sox scandal. It's the biggest taboo. No pepper games, no betting, no nothing. We see every
right there in the clubhouse.
And it's one of those, right, it's there. It's at every place you go. And that's the one thing. Listen, I'm not saying these other transgressions were easy, but gambling in particular is just such a hard transgression to get past in baseball. I'm just saying that if he had just said, just owned up to it, it would have been, that's all he had to do, and he didn't. So he sort of made his own bed with that. So I don't see him in the Hall of Fame. I don't. But I mean, I hope I'm wrong. I hope I am wrong, because I like him. I don't dislike Pete. I've known him for a long time. I did a lot of games on the Game of the Week when Pete was involved. He was always square with me. I don't find him to be a bad guy at all. I found him to be a good guy. I thought he did nice work when he was on Fox. He was a lot of fun to have. But I got to tell you, you just got to own up to those things. And the day that Alex came clean and he owned up to his transgressions, with the day he got past it, look at him now. You got to own up to you. We all make mistakes. You just got to own up to them. That's the lesson here. All right, speech over. I'm done. Sorry about that.
Wow. Listen, I can't thank you more, Flip. You gave us overtime. The check is in the mail. It's been amazing. You're a legend.
It's 3 a.m. I got to go to diner.
I think it's like 3 a.m. or something like that. But
I gotta tell you, man, I'm like thrilled, because I'm like marking out to him, because you know
too.
Kay does the credits every game. You know what I mean? So I'm like marking out to the guy. I really am. I'm like gives me goosebumps, and because I'm such a huge Yankees fan. So and I hear Kay say his name, 162 times a year. So it's like it's been a pleasure. And Big Daddy, unfortunately, it's all downhill from here. We'll never get another guest like this. Hopefully there's baseball, John, and you know what? It'd be a hard thing to do, but if I look up there and I spot you, if you see a guy who's about 260 pounds waving his arms like this, trying to say hello to you up in the booth or something, that'll be me. So
Not Bartolo Colon. Lupe Bartolo Colon.
the Bartolo.
I thought it might be
John,
Bartolo
again,
Colon.
thanks for having us on and coming to the Mario and Chaos Show, episode 63, season 2, fans. It doesn't get any better. I want to thank Paul Perez, Mario, the legend, John Filippelli. And again, I'll thank Dino for hooking us up like this. Mario, take us out of episode 63. John, stay on board, and we'll say goodbye officially. Mario, take us out of Mario and Chaos Show.
Bye,
Fans, it's been
Paul.
unbelievable.
Ladies and gentlemen, join us next week for episode number 64. We'll be rude, crude, and very bad language. Big Daddy will be swearing at me once again, and I will be talking about one or maybe both of my testicles. But tune in next week for episode number 64. Please stay safe. Keep your masks on. Keep your social distancing. This thing is not over. And Big Daddy, who knows? Maybe one of these days I can be next to Kay and somebody can get beamed, and that'll be my opening when Kay will go, that's gotta hurt, right underneath the helmet. I hope he's okay, and I can go, Michael, you know, I remember when I was in St. Louis and Kamala headbutted me. Kind of felt similar, but who knows?
The Ugandan giant? The
Ugandan giant. We'll see you next week, guys.